The cruiser's red and blue lights bled across the wet asphalt, washing over the sedan in front like a warning flare. Malcolm Reed's grip tightened on the steering wheel, his suit jacket creased beneath the seatbelt, his tie still knotted from the late-night court session. He hadn't been speeding. He hadn't rolled a stop. He knew what this was. Boots crunched gravel. A flashlight beam stabbed through his window, white glare flooding his face. The officer's voice came low, with that deliberate slowness reserved for suspects, not citizens. License and registration. Now, Malcolm slid the documents out with steady hands, his law school cum battling the pulse hammering in his ears. The officer didn't glance at the license before smirking. Driving this kind of car, wearing that suit, where'd you steal it from? The words knifed through the air, sharper than the cold night. Heat rose in Malcolm's chest, but he kept still, jaw locked. He had argued constitutional cases before robed justices, yet here, on the shoulder of a lonely highway, all the law in the world felt like paper. Traffic hissed past, indifferent. The officer leaned closer, hand resting on his holster, eyes daring him to protest. You people never learn. For a moment, Malcolm saw the whole machinery behind those words, gavels, silent juries, headlines waiting to twist truth into suspicion. His breath caught. The officer's hand lifted toward the door handle. The click of metal echoed like a verdict, and Malcolm realized he might not leave this road as a free man. The rain had thinned to a mist, leaving the highway slick under the halo of passing headlights. Malcolm Reed guided his Lexus in the right lane, steady, cautious. The courthouse lights were far behind him now, swallowed in the dark. All he wanted was home, his wife, his bed, the silence after argument. But then the flash, red and blue, exploding in the mirror. His pulse jolted. He checked the speedometer, 68 in a 70. His signals had been clean, his tags up to date. He already knew. The cruiser slid in behind him, engine growling. He guided his car onto the shoulder. Wet gravel spat beneath his tires as he came to a stop. Silence for 3 seconds. Then the metallic slam of a door. Boots against wet earth. A flashlight beam cut the dark. The officer stopped at his window, the light stabbing his face. License and registration. Now, Malcolm kept his voice calm. Yes, officer. His fingers moved with measured precision, pulling the wallet from his jacket, sliding out the license, reaching for the beam tracked his every move like a predator's eye. He extended both items through the open window. The officer, stocky, pale, jaw tight with a perpetual sneer, didn't take them immediately. He let the light linger on Malcolm's skin, his suit, the gleam of his watch. Driving this kind of car, he muttered, wearing that suit. Where'd you steal it from? The words cracked through the night. Malcolm inhaled slowly, felt the sting behind his ribs, the humiliation pressed into every syllable, but his voice stayed steady. It's mine. My name is on the registration. The officer snatched the papers, glanced at them without reading. The flashlight angled back up. You read, yes. Step out of the vehicle. Malcolm's fingers tightened on the wheel. Is there a reason, officer? The man leaned in, breath heavy, with stale coffee. Because I told you to. For a moment, Malcolm saw the courtroom again, mahogany bench, black robes, the gavel striking wood. He had argued in front of 9 justices that very week, but here, none of it mattered. Here, it was one man, a badge, and the silence of the roadside. He unlatched his seatbelt. The click sounded too loud in his ears. Hands where I can see them. The officer barked. Malcolm raised them, palms open, and pushed the door with his hip. Cool night air rushed in. The gravel shifted under his polished shoes as he stepped out. The cruiser's headlights made a stage of the asphalt. Cars hissed by, their drivers catching glimpses, slowing, then accelerating away. The officer circled him slowly, flashlight sweeping like he was inspecting contraband. What's in the trunk? Briefs, court files, clothes. You some kind of salesman. I'm an attorney. The officer stopped, eyes narrowing. Attorney? Huh. For who? The United States Supreme Court. For a beat, silence. The rain ticked against the cruiser's hood, then a low chuckle. Supreme Court, the officer repeated, savoring it, as though Malcolm had told the night's best joke. You expect me to believe that? I don't expect you to believe anything. I expect you to follow the law. The officer's smile vanished. His hand dropped to the holster at his hip, resting casually, like punctuation. You people never learn, he said softly. The words slid under Malcolm's skin like a blade. He clenched his jaw, tasted the metallic edge of restraint. He had faced hostile justices, but none had ever spoken with that stripped-down contempt. Naked and unguarded, the officer stepped closer, close enough that Malcolm could see the rain beating on his collar, the faint scar along his chin. "Spread your arms. I'm gonna search you. You have no probable cause. I've got cause enough." Hands on the hood, Malcolm stood still. "You are violating my rights." The officer tilted his head, lips curling. "Out here, I'm the rights." The words reverberated. Somewhere down the road a truck rumbled, its lights sweeping past. For half a second Malcolm considered refusing outright, planting his feet in the gravel and daring the man to escalate. But he saw the holster, the silence, the empty stretch of road. He turned, placed his palms against the hood of his own car. Cold metal bit into his skin. The officer's hands moved down his arms, rough, deliberate. Malcolm's teeth pressed together until his jaw ached. "What's this?" the officer asked, tapping Malcolm's briefcase still visible in the passenger seat. "Legal documents," the man grunted, uninterested, his hand shoved against Malcolm's back. "You got drugs, weapons, anything I should know about?" "No." "You lying to me?" "No." The search dragged on, invasive in its intent if not in its reach, each motion designed to humiliate. Malcolm breathed evenly, training his body not to flinch. Finally, the officer stepped back. "Turn around." Malcolm faced him. The flashlight hit his eyes again. "You think being a lawyer makes you special? I think the law is supposed to protect citizens, not tonight." The officer's hand drifted back to the holster, fingers brushing the clasp. His voice dropped lower, more dangerous. "You fit the description of someone we're looking for." Malcolm's chest tightened. He had heard that line before, in other stories, in other cities, always the same script. "What description?" "You'll find out downtown." Malcolm's throat went dry. His mind flicked through the process: booking, fingerprints, mugshot, headlines, Supreme Court attorney arrested in traffic stop. The spin would begin before the truth caught up. "Officer," he said carefully, "I advise you to reconsider your course of action." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm informing you." The man's smile returned, thinner this time. "That's what I thought." From the cruiser radio came a burst of static, a dispatcher's clipped voice. The officer ignored it, eyes locked on Malcolm. "Hands behind your back." The words froze the night. Malcolm's breath hitched. Gravel shifted beneath his shoes as he stood motionless, every muscle straining between outrage and survival. He opened his mouth, but the officer cut him off. "Don't make me say it again." The rain had stopped. The air hung heavy, the silence fractured only by the hiss of distant traffic. Malcolm lifted his hands slowly, wrists angling back. The officer's cuffs gleamed in the light, metal jaws opening with a click that sounded like judgment. And as the steel pressed cold against his skin, Malcolm understood. The fight had already begun, and he was standing alone on the first battlefield. The cuffs bit into Malcolm's wrists with each movement, cold steel, too tight, designed less for safety than for dominance. Officer Briggsy had finally caught the man's name from the embroidered badge, pushed him toward the back of the cruiser. The world had slowed to headlights and silence. But every passing car reminded Malcolm he was on display. He thought of Janine, thought of the dinner she'd left warming in the oven, the text message unanswered. "Keep moving," Briggs snapped. Malcolm stopped by the trunk of his car. "You have no legal grounds for this. I want your supervisor present." Briggs shoved him forward with a hand on his shoulder. "I don't take orders from criminals." A horn blared as the sedan swerved to avoid the scene. The driver's face turned, eyes wide at the sight of a black man in cuffs under blinding headlights. Malcolm could almost hear the unspoken judgment. "Another one. Caught." Briggs raised his voice so the traffic could hear. Suspect was resisting. Had to restrain him. The lie seared. Malcolm's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. "Say something," Lawyer Briggs mocked. "Don't you have some fancy speech for me? Some big constitutional lesson?" Malcolm's voice was low, even. "You're recording yourself into a corner." The smirk faltered for half a second. Then the officer yanked open the back door of the cruiser. "Get in." Malcolm slid onto the vinyl seat, cuffs forcing his shoulders back. The door slammed, sealing him into a cage that smelled of sweat and stale cigarettes. Through the window, he watched Briggs pace to his Lexus, flashlight sweeping across the leather interior, the stack of briefs on the seat. Briggs opened the glove box, rifled through papers, muttering. Minutes dragged until another set of headlights pulled up. A second cruiser. Out stepped a younger officer, lean, nervous in his movements. He glanced at Malcolm through the glass before turning to Briggs. "What's the charge?" "Suspicious vehicle. Driver fits a description." The younger one frowned. Description of who? Don't worry about it. Briggs clapped him on the shoulder. We'll get the paperwork sorted. Malcolm leaned forward, voice sharp through the cracked window. You're fabricating cause. That's a violation of your oath. The younger cop froze, met his eyes, then quickly looked away. Want me to run the plates? Do it, Briggs said. I'll finish the search. Malcolm's chest heaved against the restraint of the cuffs. Every motion felt weighted with futility. The law was his weapon, his shield, but here it dissolved into air. Briggs's voice carried, intentionally loud. Looks like our lawyer's hiding something in here. Gotta tear this apart. The second officer hesitated. You sure? He said he's an attorney. Briggs barked a laugh. And I'm the governor. Don't be gullible. Malcolm pressed his forehead against the window, the cold glass grounding him. He could imagine the footage already. By now, someone had pulled out a phone, recorded the sight of him cuffed in the back seat, his car gutted under flashing lights, his phone still in the front console, unreachable. A cluster of cars slowed, rubbernecking. One rolled down a window. A woman's voice. What happened? Briggs straightened, performance sharpening. Routine stop. Driver became uncooperative. The woman gasped, rolled her window back up, sped off. Malcolm closed his eyes. He wanted to shout, to correct, to expose, but every word could be twisted. Every syllable would be fed back into the script Briggs was writing. The younger officer approached the window. His voice was softer. Sir, do you have anyone to call? My wife, Malcolm answered. But you haven't let me make that call. The young man glanced over his shoulder. Briggs was bent in the driver's seat, rifling through documents. The younger officer's lips parted, as if he wanted to say more, but he stepped back, swallowing it. Briggs returned, waving Malcolm's license. You've got yourself a record tonight, counselor. Malcolm locked eyes with him. This is an abuse of authority. Every second you prolong this, you add to your liability. The officer leaned in close to the glass, grin twisted. Who do you think they'll believe? A cop on duty, or a black man with a story? The words detonated inside Malcolm's chest. Another car slowed. A teenage boy leaned out with a phone raised high, recording. Briggs stiffened, then barked. Keep moving. The boy didn't. The camera stayed trained on the scene. Malcolm drew a breath. Even through the cage of glass, his voice carried. Record everything. Briggs slammed a fist on the cruiser's roof, startling the younger cop. I said move on, but the boy stayed until traffic forced his mother's car forward. The light of the phone vanished into the night. Malcolm felt a surge of fragile hope. One witness, one thread, may be enough. Briggs opened the driver's side of the cruiser and dropped into the seat. He twisted around, eyes gleaming with irritation. You're under arrest. Disorderly conduct, resisting. Malcolm's pulse thundered. False charges. You keep talking. I'll add obstruction. The cuffs dug deeper into his skin as the cruiser lurched forward, tires spitting gravel onto the highway. Malcolm stared at the road unspooling ahead. The humiliation had settled like lead, heavier than the restraints. He imagined headlines, imagined whispers in court hallways, imagined students reading about his disgrace. The system he defended was now grinding him into spectacle. Briggs's radio crackled again. Unit 5, confirmed transport. Confirmed, Briggs said. His voice smooth now, professional for the record. Male suspect in custody. Malcolm's chest tightened at the phrasing. Not man, not citizen, suspect. The words swallowed his identity whole. The younger officer followed in the second cruiser. Headlights steady in the rear view. Malcolm caught his reflection in the divider glasscome surface. Eyes burning. He whispered to himself, too low for Briggs to hear. They will see. They will know. But in that moment, under the wash of sirens and fluorescent dashboard glow, Malcolm Reed sat branded as guilty, paraded down a highway stage, his dignity shackled for an audience that might never hear the truth. And Briggs smiled into the dark, certain the night belonged to him. The station loomed out of the night like a bunker, windowless concrete lit by a jaundiced floodlight. The cruiser nosed into the lot, brakes squealing. Malcolm felt the cuffs cut tighter as Briggs yanked him from the back seat. The night air tasted of oil and wet asphalt. Move. The front doors swallowed them whole. Fluorescent light buzzing overhead. The smell hit first bleach, sweat, and burned coffee. Behind the desk, an older sergeant looked up, unimpressed. Another one. Briggs smirked. Disorderly conduct. Non-compliant. The sergeant eyed Malcolm's suit, then his skin. The skepticism was immediate but silent. He reached for the intake log. Name. Malcolm lifted his chin. Malcolm Reed. Briggs leaned in with mock formality. Claims he's a Supreme Court lawyer. A chuckle rippled from a cluster of uniforms at a nearby desk. One muttered, "Sure he is." Malcolm's voice cut through. "Check the bar registry. Washington, D.C. My credentials are there." The sergeant scribbled, not looking up. "Occupation, I told you." Briggs cut in, tone sharp. "Put down unemployed. He's making stories." The sergeant's pen obeyed. Malcolm's stomach turned. His truth, rewritten in ink without a fight. They led him down a narrow hall, walls painted a sickly yellow. A barred door buzzed open, closing behind him with a metallic slam. The sound echoed like a verdict. Inside, officers lingered near vending machines, their conversation low but audible, always playing the victim. "Bet he mouths off in court, too." Briggs pushed Malcolm into a holding chair, cuffs still locked. "Phone call," Malcolm said. His voice remained steady, though his wrists burned. "Later." Briggs grinned, pulling a clipboard. "First we do paperwork." He began dictating. Subject was hostile. Raised his voice. Refused lawful commands. Malcolm interrupted. "Those are lies." Briggs ignored him, writing faster. "Possible suspicion of stolen vehicle." The sergeant, leaning in the doorway, didn't flinch. Not a question, not a correction. Just silence. Complicity baked into procedure. Malcolm inhaled through his teeth. "Document everything in memory. Dates, words, tone." His lawyer's instinct filed every detail like evidence. Minutes bled into hours. They left him cuffed. Denied water. Each passing officer glanced. Some smirked. None intervened. Finally, a young clerk entered, holding a stack of forms. Her eyes flicked to Malcolm, then to Briggs. "Sir, he's really on the DC bar registry. It matches." The room paused. Briggs waved her off. "Anyone can fake a record online." Malcolm locked eyes with the clerk. She hesitated, lips parting as if to argue, then sealed her silence, burying herself in the papers. Briggs leaned closer to Malcolm. His whisper was meant for him alone. "You think titles protect you? Out here, nobody cares who you are." Malcolm met his gaze. "Every word you've spoken tonight will surface. Every falsified note, every denial. The record will outlast you." For the first time, Briggs's smirk faltered, a flicker, brief as lightning. Then, the sergeant stepped in. "Enough. Lock him in." Holding, Briggs yanked Malcolm up, dragging him through another barred door. The cell reeked of disinfectant and damp concrete. One steel bench, one flickering light. The cuffs came off with a snap. Briggs leaned in, voice low. "Enjoy your night, counselor." The door clanged shut. Bopham sat, rubbing the deep grooves on his wrists. The echo of the lock reverberated through his chest. He was sealed in, alone. Yet beneath the humiliation, beneath the exhaustion, something colder settled in him. Resolve. He whispered into the fluorescent hum. "This won't disappear into your walls." Outside, the station carried on, indifferent, but the first cracks in its silence had already begun to spread. The cell had no clock, but Malcolm measured time in pulses, his heartbeat slowing from panic into controlled rhythm, then surging again at every echoing step in the hall. The fluorescent light flickered overhead, a constant reminder that he was still inside the machinery, stripped of titles, reduced to a body in a cage. Finally, keys rattled, the door swung open. Briggs entered with the sergeant behind him, holding a clipboard. "Your lawyer's story," Briggs said, smirking. "You want to call someone? You'll get one call. Make it count." The sergeant unlocked the cuffs they'd refastened, pointing toward the wall phone bolted near the cells. Malcolm stood, wrists aching, and dialed the number he knew by heart. Each ring felt like a stone dropped into water. Janine's voice came through, hushed but urgent. "Hello, Janine, it's me." A sharp intake of breath. "Malcolm, where are you? I've been calling." What happened?" He closed his eyes. "I've been arrested." A silence that wasn't silence. He could hear her breathing, fast, disbelieving. "Arrested? For what?" "For existing in the wrong place, in the wrong skin, under the wrong officer." His voice wavered for the first time all night. Her tone sharpened. "Where are you?" "The county precinct. I don't know how long they'll keep me." Behind him, Briggs leaned against the bars, listening with a grin. Malcolm turned his back to him, gripping the phone tighter. "Listen to me," Janine said. "I'm calling Carla. I'm calling David. We'll get statements. We'll get the media. You're not going to disappear into that cell." "They've falsified everything," Malcolm whispered. "Resisting, disorderly, suspicious vehicle. They're writing the script as they go." "That's why we'll rewrite it," she snapped. determination cutting through her fear. Stay calm, Malcolm. Do not give them 1 inch more than they already stole. Her steadiness anchored him. He could see her face, eyes lit with both rage and sorrow, lips tight as if holding back tears. I'm sorry, he said softly. No, don't you dare. Her voice broke. Don't apologize for breathing. The sergeant tapped his watch. Wrap it up. Malcolm's hand trembled on the receiver. I love you. We're coming for you, she said. Hold the line. The phone clicked as the sergeant disconnected the call. Briggs chuckled, low, touching. Wife's rallying the cavalry. Let's see how far that gets her. Malcolm turned. His voice had steel now. Farther than you think. Briggs smirked, but the twitch in his jaw betrayed irritation. Hours later, in a dim office 2 towns away, Janine's voice trembled with fury as she spoke into her own phone. They have him in holding. No charges that hold water. They're trying to bury him. Carla, a civil rights attorney and longtime friend, answered firmly. Then we drag them into daylight. Get me names, badge numbers. We'll put pressure on the chief before sunrise. Janine's next call was to David, a journalist who owed Malcolm favors. Write it clean, she ordered. Don't sensationalize. Just tell the truth. Back in the station, Briggs filed his report with deliberate strokes of the pen, each word a weapon. Suspect grew aggressive, verbal threats, non-compliant with lawful commands. The sergeant signed off without reading. Routine, reflex, complicity. In his cell, Malcolm sat on the steel bench, head bowed, listening to the hum of the lights. His pulse had slowed again, but inside his mind, every detail sharpened Briggs's words, the smirk, the silence of the others. He was building his case already, brick by brick. The door buzzed. Briggs entered again, hands on his belt. Enjoy your call, counselor. Malcolm looked up, unflinching. You've made a mistake. Briggs leaned closer, sneer widening. I don't make mistakes. From somewhere outside, a phone rang. A secretary's voice echoed faintly down the hall. It's for the captain. Urgent. Briggs's smile faltered. Malcolm's lips curved, not quite into a smile, but something colder. You're about to learn the difference between power and authority. The fluorescent bulb above hissed, flickered once, then burned steady, casting the cell in sharp white. And for the first time since the roadside, the silence seemed to tilt in Malcolm's favor. The morning broke, not with sunlight but with the glare of television screens. News anchors spoke over grainy photos of Malcolm Reed, the siren below him flashing. Lawyer detained in traffic stop. Authorities cite suspicious behavior. At the precinct, Malcolm sat in his cell, watching the flicker from the mounted TV across the hall. His own face, pulled from a courtroom headshot, now framed as controversy. His stomach clenched at the word suspicious. Briggs passed by, coffee in hand, chuckling. Look at that, famous already. Malcolm's reply was quiet, but each syllable cut. Defamation will be added to the list. Briggs sipped his coffee, unbothered. Media loves a bad guy. You're their bad guy today. Outside the station, cameras were already gathering. Reporters traded half, each shaping the story with the fragments they'd been fed. Driver resisted, officer, commands, possible stolen vehicle, identity, disputed claims to be a Supreme Court. Attorney Janine stood among them, her voice steady despite the chaos. Microphones pushed toward her. My husband is Malcolm Reed, she said firmly. He is a licensed attorney who has argued before the United States Supreme Court. He was stopped, profiled, and unlawfully detained. The truth will come out. A reporter shouted, Isn't it true he resisted arrest? Her eyes blazed. What he resisted was humiliation. The clip spread within hours. Online forums lit with debates, some defending, others dismissing. In the holding cell, Malcolm listened as 2 officers muttered near the desk. His wife's out there stirring up trouble. Protesters already calling. Briggs waved them off. It'll die down. It always does. But it wasn't dying. That afternoon, Malcolm was dragged into an interrogation room, a camera recording from the corner. The sergeant sat across, papers neatly stacked. Mr. Reed, you're being charged with disorderly conduct and resisting arrest. Do you wish to make a statement? Malcolm folded his hands on the table, wrists raw from the cuffs. His voice was calm, deliberate. I was stopped without cause. I complied fully. The officer fabricated charges to justify his actions. That's my statement. The sergeant scribbled, uninterested. Anything else? Yes. Malcolm's gaze cut sharp. I request immediate release. You have no legal grounds to hold me. The sergeant exhaled through his nose, slid the papers into a folder. and left without answering. Malcolm leaned back in the chair, feeling the eyes of the camera. Record this, record everything. By evening, the protest outside swelled. Students, lawyers, activists, locals all gathered with signs. Justice for Reed. End profiling. We see you. Chants rose into the night, echoing against the concrete station walls. Inside, Briggs stood by the window, jaw tight. Unbelievable, he muttered. All this for one stop. The younger officer Vance shifted uneasily. Sir, the crowd's growing. Maybe we should. What? Briggs snapped. Back down because a mob shouts at us. Evans looked at Malcolm's cell down the hall. His voice dropped. What if he really is who he says? Briggs slammed his cup onto the counter, coffee splattering. He's nobody. You hear me? Nobody. But even Briggs couldn't silence the television. The national networks had picked up Janine's statement. One anchor's voice carried into the hall. Reed is a Supreme Court attorney known for recent arguments on civil liberties. His detention raises questions about racial profiling and abuse of power. Malcolm heard every word. His chest tightened, not with relief, but with the knowledge that his humiliation was now public record, branded on every screen. That night, Janine called again, this time patched through official channels. Her voice was fierce. The world knows. Malcolm, you're not invisible anymore. He closed his eyes. But at what cost? Cost, Lahashi said. The cost is theirs now. Static hissed through the line before the guard cut it. Malcolm remained seated, head bowed, listening to the chants that still thundered from outside. They weren't chanting his name alone. They were chanting against the system that had locked him here, and for the first time in 24 hours, Malcolm felt something shift the narrative. The balance, the weight of silence, cracking. Outside, the cameras stayed. Inside, the walls could no longer contain the story. By morning, the air outside the precinct trembled with voices. Hundreds crowded the sidewalks, some holding signs, others chanting rhythmically as cameras rolled. News vans lined the street. Helicopters circled overhead. Malcolm sat on the steel bench in his cell, the noise filtering through the concrete like a heartbeat. He pressed his palms together, steadying his breath. Every cheer, every shouted demand, was both vindication and weight. The door buzzed. Officer Evans entered with a clipboard, his face tight. You've stirred up a storm out there. Malcolm met his eyes. The storm was there long before me. I'm just the proof. Evans hesitated, then lowered his voice. Briggs filed a report. Says you were belligerent. Tried to lunge. He added you smelled of alcohol. Malcolm's head snapped up. That's perjury. Evans's shoulders shifted uneasily. It'll be his word against yours. And the footage, Malcolm said, voice steady. Evans blinked. What footage? Malcolm leaned forward, eyes sharp. Someone recorded the stop. I saw the phone. That evidence is out there. Evans swallowed, backing toward the door. Don't count on it saving you. The buzz of the lock closed him out. Hours later, in the press swarm outside, a shaky video hit the internet. A teenager's voice off-screen whispered, he didn't do anything. The camera caught Briggs's flashlight blinding Malcolm, the cuffs clamping his wrist, and then, the damning line, you people never learn. The clip spread like wildfire. By noon, it played on every major network. Commentators dissected it. Activists amplified it. The chants outside doubled in force. We saw the tape. Inside, Briggs stormed through the hall, face flushed. He barked at the sergeant. That video's out of context. Doesn't prove anything. The sergeant said nothing, shuffling papers with studied detachment. Briggs turned, spotting Malcolm through the bars. Congratulations, you got your circus. Malcolm rose slowly, his voice low but carrying. It's not a circus, it's accountability. Briggs gripped the bars, face inches from Malcolm's. Accountability. You think they'll take your side over mine? Malcolm's gaze didn't waver. They already have. The tension stretched, broken only by the sound of another chant from outside. No justice, no peace. That evening, Malcolm was escorted to a small conference room. Janine sat across from him, her hands clasped so tightly the knuckles whitened. The guard left, closing the door. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she reached across the table, fingertips brushing his. You're everywhere, she whispered. The country is watching. Malcolm's throat tightened. And what do they see? A lawyer in cuffs, a man branded suspicious. Her grip tightened. They see what was done to you. They see the truth. He studied her face, eyes rimmed with exhaustion, fire burning beneath. This will scar us, Janine. Even if I win, I lose something. Her jaw set. Then we carry the scar together. Silence held them. Then the guard returned, tapping his watch. As Malcolm was led away, Janine called after him, "They can't bury you. Not anymore." That night, the footage replayed again and again across the nation. Pundits debated legality. Protesters filled city squares. Comment threads exploded with both rage and denial. And in a quiet room of the precinct, Briggs sat with his superior, the captain. "This has gotten out of hand," the captain muttered. Rubbing his temples, Briggs slammed the fist on the desk. "He's lying. That kid's video doesn't show the whole stop." The captain's gaze was cold. "Doesn't matter. Public opinion's already chosen a side, and it's not yours." Briggs's jaw tightened. "So what? You throw me under the bus?" The captain leaned forward. "If it comes to that, better one officer than the whole department." The words landed like a gavel. Briggs knew the shift had begun, the institution's weight sliding off his shoulders, pressing down on him instead. Back in his cell, Malcolm sat with his back against the wall, the chants outside still rising. For the first time, he felt the scale tipping, not in silence, not in secret, but in the open court of public opinion. He whispered into the fluorescent light, "The truth is louder than your walls." And the walls, once deafening, felt just a little thinner. The courthouse buzzed like a hive. Reporters lined the marble steps, cameras flashing as Malcolm Reed was escorted through the double doors, no longer in cuffs but still under guard. His suit was creased, his eyes hollow from sleepless nights, but his posture-straight steady commanded the room. Inside, benches overflowed with citizens, activists, and lawyers. The hearing wasn't yet a trial but a preliminary review of the charges filed by Briggs. Still, the stakes felt heavier, not just Malcolm's freedom, but the credibility of the justice system itself. The judge entered, the gavel struck. "All rise." Malcolm's attorney, a longtime colleague named Rivera, leaned close as they stood. "Stay composed. They're waiting for you to slip." Malcolm's jaw tightened. "They'll wait forever." Across the aisle, Briggs sat in uniform, polished badge glinting under the courtroom lights. His expression was carved in stone, but the faint twitch in his jaw betrayed the storm beneath. The prosecution began with a flat recitation of the charges: disorderly conduct, resisting arrest, endangerment, words stacked like bricks, each one meant to bury. Rivera rose. "We move to dismiss. My client is not only a practicing attorney but one who has stood before the United States Supreme Court. He was stopped without cause, arrested without justification, and maligned without evidence. The charges are fiction." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The judge raised a hand. "Ordered." Briggs's attorney rose next, voice booming. The officer acted lawfully. Mr. Reed was aggressive, refused commands, and posed a safety risk. Malcolm clenched his fists under the table. Rivera spoke before he could. "Then let's review the evidence." The defense wheeled in a monitor. The lights dimmed. The teenager's video filled the screen. Gasps spread as the flashlight beam seared across Malcolm's face. The cuffs snapped. Briggs's voice dripping contempt. "You people never learn." For a moment, the room was silent. The judge's brow furrowed. Rivera let the silence hang before speaking. "Does this look like a threat, or does it look like harassment?" Briggs shifted in his seat. His lawyer interjected, "That video is incomplete. It doesn't show what happened before." Rivera cut him off. "Then produce body cam footage." "Where is it?" The courtroom stiffened. The absence of the body cam video had already raised questions in the press. Now, under oath, it was a blade. Briggs's attorney faltered. "The device malfunctioned." Rivera leaned in, voice low but resonant. "Convenient malfunctions, disappearing evidence, fabricated reports. How many times must this pattern repeat before the system admits it's wrong?" The judge rapped the gavel. "Counsel, enough editorializing." But the damage was done. The gallery was no longer still. People whispered, muttered, shook their heads. Briggs stared at Malcolm across the room, their eyes locked, one radiating fury, the other unflinching resolve. During recess, Malcolm sat with Rivera in the hallway. Janine joined them, pressing a hand to his shoulder. "They're cracking," she whispered. Malcolm's voice was quiet. "Not enough. The system protects itself." Rivera nodded. "True, but public eyes are on this one. That makes it different." Down the hall, reporters swarmed Briggs as he exited the restroom. "Officer, did you use a racial slur during the stop? Why did your body cam fail? Are you concerned about perjury charges?" Briggs pushed through without answering, jaw clenched tight enough to ache. Back inside, the hearing dragged. Legal arguments circled like vultures. But the video clip replayed in everyone's mind. By day's end, the judge announced a continuance. This court will reconvene after reviewing additional evidence. Defendant will remain under supervised release. The gavel fell. Malcolm's cuffs were gone, but he still felt the weight as they left. A young man in the gallery called out, "We've got your back, Reed." The words cut through the fatigue, landing somewhere deep. Malcolm didn't turn, didn't smile, but a spark flickered, small, dangerous, alive. That night, outside the courthouse, protesters gathered again. Their chants weren't only for him anymore. They were for every unseen stop, every silenced voice, and Malcolm realized with a chill, his case wasn't just his case. The system itself now stood trial. The courthouse lights burned late into the night. Outside, chants continued, muffled through the heavy doors. Inside, Malcolm sat with Rivera and Janine in a dim side room, exhaustion carved into his face. "They'll try to bury this," Rivera said flatly, spreading out new documents across the table. "The department's already closing ranks. Briggs isn't the only one on the hook. They'll protect him to protect themselves." Malcolm's eyes traced the words on the page. Official reports, each contradicting the next. Their lies are sloppy, but sloppiness doesn't matter when power's on their side. Janine's hand gripped his forearm. Power's shifting. Every camera out there proves it. The door creaked. Officer Evans stepped in, hat twisting in his hands. His voice was hushed. "I shouldn't be here." Rivera stiffened. "Then why are you?" Evans glanced at Malcolm, then at the floor. "Because it's going too far. Briggs," he changed the report, added things that didn't happen. "I saw the draft before he altered it." The room froze. "You'd testify to that?" Rivera pressed. Evans's face tightened. "Testify, and lose my badge, my pension, my family's security. They'll crucify me." Malcolm leaned forward, voice quiet, heavy. "They already crucified me. If you stay silent, you help them do it again." Evans swallowed, sweat beading on his temple. I'll think about it." He turned quickly, leaving the door half open, the echo of his footsteps retreating down the hall. Janine exhaled sharply. "Think about it." That's all he can manage. Malcolm closed his eyes. Fear keeps the machine running. Even the ones who see the truth choke on it. The next morning, the media storm intensified. New angles of the teenager's video surfaced, showing bystanders' shock, Briggs's aggression, Malcolm's calm restraint. Editorials erupted. The Reed case and America's reckoning. At the station, Briggs slammed his locker shut. "They're painting me as a villain," he snapped at a fellow officer. "You gave them the brush," Evans muttered under his breath. Briggs whipped around. "What did you say?" Evans's eyes flicked up. "Nothing, sir." But Briggs heard it. He shoved past, rage brewing like fire under steel. That afternoon, Malcolm was brought to the courthouse again. Reporters swarmed, flashbulbs igniting. One shouted, "Mr. Reed, do you believe the system will clear your name?" Malcolm paused, the weight of 1,000 microphones pressing against his silence. Then he answered, voice firm, "The system doesn't clear names. People do." The words cut through the air, carried instantly onto broadcasts and time. Within minutes, they became a rallying cry online. #PeopleDo. Inside, Briggs took the stand for a pretrial testimony. His voice was sharp, rehearsed. He resisted commands. He was hostile. "I feared for my safety." Rivera rose, eyes narrowing, and yet the video shows none of this hostility. Briggs's jaw clenched, because it started earlier. Off camera, Rivera stepped closer. "Convenient, again. Just like your malfunctioning body cam." Briggs's composure wavered for the first time. He glanced at the gallery, packed with ICE activists, reporters, students, elders. Judgment sat heavy in the air. Rivera let the silence stretch before speaking. "Do you want to repeat, under oath, that Mr. Reed lunged at you?" Briggs's lips parted, but no words came. His hand twitched on the stand. Rivera leaned in, voice cutting like glass. "Because another officer is prepared to testify otherwise." The room erupted. Briggs's face drained. He snapped his head toward Evans in the gallery, who sat rigid, eyes forward, jaw locked. The judge hammered the gavel. "Order, order in this courtroom." When the session ended, chaos spilled into the halls. Reporters surged, activists shouted, officers muttered in corners. Malcolm found himself standing across from Evans again, the young officer's face pale as chalk. "You just made yourself a target," Malcolm said quietly. Evans's voice shook. "Better me than the truth." For the first time, Malcolm allowed himself the faintest nod of respect that night. The protests swelled beyond the courthouse. Marches rippled across the city. Crowds carried signs, not just with Malcolm's name, but with names of others unheard. UNREMEMBERED. Malcolm watched from the courthouse window, the sound of thousands rising through the streets. His chest tightened. This was bigger now. Bigger than his freedom. Bigger than Briggs, he whispered, almost to himself. The breaking point isn't mine, it's theirs. And outside, the chants kept rising. A tide no institution could dam. The final day of hearings dawned gray, the courthouse steps slick with rain, yet the crowds didn't thin. Umbrellas dotted the plaza, signs held high despite the downpour. Justice is watching. No more silence. #people do. Inside, the tension was suffocating. The courtroom swelled beyond capacity. Cameras poised like predators. Every cough, every shuffle of paper, sounded amplified against the heavy silence. Malcolm entered in a navy suit borrowed from Rivera's office, tie perfectly knotted by Janine's hands. He walked tall, but inside, his body carried the weight of sleepless nights, raw wrists, and an endless churn of questions. At the front, Briggs sat rigid in uniform, his badge gleaming under fluorescent lights. He stared straight ahead, but sweat gathered along his hairline. His attorney whispered rapidly at his side, but Briggs didn't answer. The judge entered. Gavel down. This hearing resumes. Counsel, proceed. Rivera rose first, voice steady, sharp. Your Honor, this case is not only about my client, it is about the integrity of the law itself. Malcolm Reed, a licensed attorney, an officer of the court, was stopped without cause, detained without justification, and maligned by fabricated reports. We have heard excuses about malfunctioning body cams, but we have seen video evidence, corroborated testimony, and a pattern of deception. The system asks us to trust officers like Briggs, but trust cannot be demanded, it must be earned. She turned, gesturing toward Malcolm. My client complied with every command. His crime, it seems, was existing while black, in a car deemed too polished for him. If this court legitimizes such conduct, it endorses profiling as justice. A ripple of murmurs coursed through the gallery. The judge gestured. Prosecution. Briggs's attorney stood, throat tight. This is being sensationalized. Officer Briggs acted within his training. Officers make difficult decisions in the moment. He believed Mr. Reed was a threat. That's not racism, it's policing under pressure. Rivera snapped back instantly. Pressure does not excuse fabrication. The judge's eyes narrowed. Order. Then came Evans. He was sworn in, his voice trembling but resolute. I saw the initial draft of Briggs's report. It did not include claims of belligerence or aggression. Those were added after review. Briggs's attorney pounced. So you're saying Officer Briggs lied? Evans's hands gripped the stand. His voice cracked, but he did not falter. I'm saying the truth was altered. Gasps rose. The judge rapped the gavel. Briggs shifted in his seat, jaw grinding. Rivera rose, her voice cutting through the room. No further questions. His courage speaks for itself. Finally, Malcolm was called. He stood, spine straight, gaze sweeping the courtroom before settling on the judge. In my career, I have defended the Constitution in the highest court of this nation. I have stood before justices who demanded clarity, precision, and respect for the law. I complied with Officer Briggs's commands. I gave him my license, my registration. I did not raise my voice. Yet still, I was cuffed, humiliated, branded suspicious. My only offense was the color of my skin against the suspicion of his eyes. He paused, letting the words hang heavy. I am not here for revenge. I am here for recognition. Recognition that truth matters. Recognition that law without justice is nothing but theater. The silence afterward was absolute, a vacuum pulling at every chest in the room. The judge leaned back, hands steepled, eyes sweeping over Briggs, Evans, Rivera, Malcolm. Finally, the gavel struck. This court finds insufficient grounds to pursue charges against Malcolm Reed. The reports presented by Officer Briggs contain discrepancies that cannot be ignored. Mr. Reed is hereby cleared of all accusations. The room shouts, fists raised, cameras flashed like lightning. The judge raised her voice over the din. Furthermore, the court recommends an internal review into Officer Briggs's conduct, including possible perjury. Briggs's face blanched, rage and panic flickering across it like a storm. He half rose from his chair, but his attorney yanked him back down. Malcolm stood frozen, relief surging yet tempered by the scar of humiliation. Janine's hand gripped his arm. grounding him. Rivera leaned in, whispering, "You won." But Malcolm's voice was quiet, steady. "No one wins in this." Outside the courthouse plaza erupted. Protesters screamed Malcolm's name, chanted slogans, lifted signs higher. The rain turned to mist, mixing with tears of triumph. Reporters swarmed, microphones thrust forward. Malcolm stepped to the podium, Janine at his side, Rivera at his back. Cameras zoomed in. "I stand here cleared of charges," he said, voice amplified through the mic. "But my dignity was stolen, my body shackled, my humanity questioned. I leave with my record intact, but scars do not vanish when the ink fades. Understand this. My case is not isolated. It is one thread in a fabric of injustice woven long before me. I am free. Yes, but freedom means nothing if justice does not follow for those without cameras, without crowds, without a voice." The crowd roared behind him. Briggs was escorted out a side entrance, face hidden, career in shreds. The institution that once shielded him now distanced itself, his badge under review, his name toxic in headlines. That night, Malcolm sat alone in his study at home. The house was quiet. Janine slept upstairs. The television in the corner replayed clips from the courthouse, his own words broadcast back to him. He turned it off. The silence was thick. He leaned back, eyes closing, breath shuddering. The victory felt hollow. He was free, but the humiliation remained etched in memory. The cold cuffs, Briggs's sneer, the way every eye had watched and judged. His phone buzzed. A message from Rivera. "You changed the conversation. Rest tonight. Tomorrow, we keep fighting." Malcolm set the phone down, staring at the ceiling. He whispered into the dark, the words only for himself. "Justice is never the end, only the start." And in the stillness, he knew the cost was permanent. But so was the crack in the system. The storm didn't end with the verdict. It only shifted. Headlines blared across every screen. Charges dropped in Reed case. Officer under review for misconduct. Nationwide debate on profiling renewed. News anchors dissected every angle, their voices looping endlessly. Commentators clashed on panels. Social media burned with hash. Malcolm's name became shorthand for both vindication and division. But in the quiet of his home, he felt no triumph. 2 days later, he sat in his office, case files stacked high on his desk. The weight of unfinished work loomed, yet his mind circled back to that night on the roadside. The flashlight glare, the cold cuffs, Briggs's voice like a brand. "You people never learn." The words returned uninvited. Every time he closed his eyes, Janine stepped in, her hand resting on the doorframe. "You're working already?" Malcolm looked up, shadows under his eyes. "Trying to." She crossed the room, laid a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to prove anything tonight." His voice was low. "That's the problem. I always do." Meanwhile, the city convulsed. The protests didn't stop. Marches spread into neighboring towns. New cases surfaced, pulled into the light by Malcolm's ordeal. Faces, names, stories pinned to posters. Carried in chance, Officer Briggs became a symbol, too, of arrogance, of exposure. The department suspended him, pending investigation. Alone in his kitchen, he drank bitter coffee, while the news dissected his downfall. Calls from colleagues stopped coming. His union distanced itself. Even his attorney stopped returning calls. He stared at his reflection in the microwave door, muttering, all this over one stop. But the reflection didn't answer. 1 week later, Malcolm returned to court not as a defendant, but as counsel. The courthouse buzzed when he entered, eyes following him. Whispers trailed down the hall. "That's him. That's Red Dot in chambers." Rivera leaned close. "You sure you're ready?" Malcolm straightened his tie. "Readiness doesn't matter. Responsibility does." And when he rose to speak for his client, a tenant facing unlawful eviction, the courtroom leaned in. His words cut clean, precise. The same voice that had defended his own life now defended another's. The cycle resumed, but with deeper gravity. That night, a news anchor replayed footage of him outside the courthouse ring, declaring, "Freedom means nothing if justice does not follow for those without cameras, without crowds, without a voice." Clips of that line spread globally. Activists quoted it on placards. Students recited it at rallies. Critics mocked it on late-night shows. But the words stuck, etched into the national conversation. At home, Janine found him staring out the window, lights at the city blinking against the dark. "You don't see it, do you?" she said softly. "See what? The change. You gave them language. You gave them courage. His eyes stayed fixed on the city. And what did it cost? She pressed a hand against his back. Scars are proof you've survived. Weeks passed. Briggs faced internal hearings, his credibility shattered. The once proud officer now walked into the precinct like a ghost, whispers trailing him. The badge on his chest felt heavier than the world's condemnation. At one session, Evans testified again. Briggs's head hung low, the system beginning to consume its own. Malcolm didn't attend, but he read every report. The poetic justice landed quietly, less as triumph, more as inevitability. Months later, Malcolm lectured at a law school. Students filled the auditorium, notebooks open, faces intent. Law is a weapon, he told them. It can cut chains, or it can tighten them, but never forget it is wielded by people. And people carry prejudice, power, and fear. That is the fight you walk into every day. A hand rose. Sir, do you regret what happened? The room stilled, but Malcolm paused, then said, I regret the world that made it possible, not the fight that followed. That evening, he walked home alone through the city. Murals had appeared since his Kaisa painted fist, faces of victims, his own likeness among them. He stopped, studying the wall of colors, his image frozen in paint. He felt no pride, only the quiet burden of being seen. Turning away, he whispered, let the art outlast me. At home, Janine waited, tea steaming on the table. She looked at him, weary but resolute. Tomorrow, she asked. He nodded. Tomorrow? Because justice was never finished. It demanded tomorrow, and the day after, and every day after that. And Malcolm Reed's guard, weary, unbroken, would meet it, not as a victim, but as a witness who refused to stay silent.